Okay. I think we should get started. Just all right. So, hey guys, thank you for coming on a Wednesday night at 7 p.m. We're here with Angus and myself and Tom for a short period of time. So today we are going to be talking about how to maximize your chances of getting your first preference for GAMSAT applications. It is a little bit of a misleading title, but I think it'll make sense once we go through the webinar. And hopefully, you guys, after we finish this webinar, you'll be at your optimal best when it comes to your GEMSAS application. So a little bit about myself. So I'm Sidipta. I'm a second-year medical student at the University of Sydney. At Fraser's, I'm the Fraser's interview. Fraser's interview tutor, as well as the quality and control lead. So I make sure that the interview tutors give you the best quality in terms of their tutoring, and as well as looking at the product and making sure it's okay. A little bit about myself before that. So I did biomed at Deakin, science at Melbourne Uni, honours at Melbourne Uni as well, and I was doing a PhD at Melbourne Uni before I dropped it for medicine. And if you have any questions about USyd or University of Wollongong or any other university, you can put in the chat. I'll give it to Angus.
Perfect. Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Angus. As it says there, section 1 and 3 tutor. Started with actually writing questions though. I'm a content developer for section 3. I apologize if anyone sat our section 3 courses and really struggled with those, but hopefully it helped. In terms of my background, I did neuroscience at University of Sydney before I went off and did an athlete thing for a little bit. So I was in Perth competing full-time as an athlete, which was great. And then kind of like made my way back into academia via honours at the University of WA, the spinal cord repair laboratory, which was super interesting. And now I am in my first year at the University of Notre Dame and loving it.
Awesome. That is that's really cool. So yeah, if you have any questions throughout the night, just let us know. We want to make this a very interactive webinar, so if you have any questions, put it in the chat. If you want to talk, raise your hand, and you can interrupt us anytime. We want to make this a very interactive webinar. And Tom, do you want to talk about yourself a little bit before you need to head off?
Yeah, of course. My background is that I'm currently a third-year medical student at ANU. I'm on my surgical placement at the moment, which means I am exhausted at all times and getting a little bit of a taste about what it's like to do surgery. That said, I'm really keen to be here today and having a quick chat with the team and everybody here. I've been working with interview preparation for coming on about 4 years now. And I remember it all started when I went and started a course with Fraser's interview and so on. So yeah, I hope everybody gets a lot out of today. And after I've introduced myself, I might actually pretty much promptly leave the meeting. So yeah, I hope you're all ready to go.
Yeah, awesome. Okay. All right. So let's get started. So we're going to talk about a couple of things today, and Angus and I will be bouncing off ideas from each other. And also Angus has an amazing background, and he has a story as well, which he talked about when we met him last. So he will talk about that. So today we'll be talking about preference in medical schools, as well as the GAMSAT and a GPA, as well as bonuses, and also we'll talk about the rural programs, as well as the personal statements, portfolio, CASPA, as well as applying to non-GEMSAS universities. So, Angus, do you want to take this slide?
Yeah, cool. So prefacing medical schools on GEMSAS. First thing, just kind of like unpacking the language. GEMSAS essentially refers to I guess you could say an institution that regulates entry into medical school. And this institution is basically employed, if you will, by a set of universities to act as that filter. Okay, so I can't list all of them off the top of my head, but the ones that are not in GAMSAT, Sidipta might be able to help me here, but I think Sydney University, Flinders University, and potentially one of the universities down in Melbourne, maybe Deakin. I'm not super sure, but that's the first distinction, right, between GAMSAT and non-GAMSAT. And the GAMSAT, you have to essentially like put in a set of preferences, right? So for all the universities that GAMSAT refers to, you need to kind of line preferences 1 through to 6, right, of where you most want to go. And they use that, much like when you got into university, as a way to kind of ensure that everyone's preferences are considered. Oh yeah.
Before you go, someone is not muted. Oh, okay. All right, got them. Okay, keep going.
No worries. Yeah, so these GAMSAT universities, you can pick your top 6 preferences, and kind of like when you were preferencing university, based on your score from GAMSAT, based on your portfolio, depending on the university, and other things, like, you know, separate tests that look to your competency, they'll basically preference you and throw you in different schools depending on how well your aggregate score is, I guess. Now, obviously, therefore, there is some strategy that goes into preferencing, because not every school has the same application process. And essentially what you want to do is use your preferencing to enable an interview at your most competitive place, right? I think that's kind of like the first step. So let's say if you had a really strong portfolio, you put portfolio schools first. If you had a really strong kind of like extracurricular tests kind of space, then you put those universities first, because they're probably going to preference you best. Here it says it's the dream school, and that is important as the first preference. But like I said, the next preference needs to be the one that you're most competitive at. For me personally, it just happened to be the same thing, University of Notre Dame, which is great. And then the third preference, as it says here, is the least difficult option in the city that you want to study in. Medicine is a lifestyle. It's really important to consider more broadly, like how you want to live your life, where you want to live your life. Do you want to be with, you know, parents and supported, or is this your chance of, you know, branching out, discovering a new city, and having a lot of fun with it? That pretty much covers all of those, I would say, outside of the piece of like skills and values. So obviously when we're talking about, you know, what you're competitive at, that's a really, unfortunately not super clear. It's not as if there's like a set of criteria that every uni kind of has, but the more you chat, the more you engage with the interview process and learn about the unis and GAMSAT, you get to a point where you kind of get a feel for each university and what they're really looking for, and you see whether or not that aligns. Yeah.
So Will has a question, I believe.
Cool.
I do indeed. Let me know if you can hear me. Thanks. Just like a mechanical, why would you and
oh no, you're cutting out.
Is that better without the headphones?
Yeah, it's better.
So you said put ones that you're more competitive for earlier, but I guess playing this one out, if you were competitive at like your 4th option, wouldn't you then just drop down to your 4th option anyway? Like, why would you not just put the ones you prefer to go to first? Does that make sense?
So I can answer that question. You're actually correct. I think so. The way I preference my application a couple of years ago is that I felt that the university that I want to go to, right, the dream university, I want to put that at the start, because they're going to go from your top preference to your last preference. They're not going to start with your 4th preference or like your last preference, right? If you put your last preference, which you're realistically competitive for, in your first preference, you're definitely going to get that, right? But you're minimizing your chances of getting into the other universities which you're less competitive for. And just by chance or luck, you might get that get an interview from there. So a lot of people, what happened? So like actually, what happened with me a couple of years ago, so in 2020, I had a really shit GAMSAT and a really shit GPA, and I was like, okay, this is like very borderline. I've seen Paging Doctor. I've seen some people with the rural background like get somewhere with this, right? I'll just like just out of like pure luck, I'll just put UniMel as number one, and then I'll put Notre Dame as number two, and then everything else, right?
Mhm.
Somehow I got a Melbourne Uni interview with my really low GAMSAT and GPA, and I was shocked. I was expecting like Wollongong or Notre Dame, and I was actually practicing for that as well. So that showed to me that if I put that university, which Melbourne Uni, as my third or fourth preference, I probably wouldn't have interviewed there. I probably wouldn't have given myself a chance to get into that university. So that's why we're saying here, if you want to maximize your odds, you want to put the university that you're less likely to get into, but is your dream university, as like upper the list, because it's like you don't you miss all. What's the phrase? It's like you miss all the chances that you don't take. You miss 100% of the chances you don't take. So it's like that. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. So you're basically just having like a fail-safe catch-all at the end of the list. Like if all these others fail, at least I've got this one I'm good at the end.
Yeah, exactly. And what happened last year, I did the same thing, and I got Wollongong, which was my fourth preference, and I knew I was going to get either Notre Dame or Wollongong. So I got there, and then I did well in the interview.
From my understanding, and again, a lot of this is behind the curtains, right? So it's really hard to be 100% certain. But when you set your preferences, let's say you get your interview, let's say it was first or second, right? So rather, let's start with the interview. They consider your first, you're not competitive, they're gone. Then they consider your second, you're not competitive, they're gone. Then they consider your third, you're competitive, there you get an interview. The subsequent round after the interviews, they collate all of the scores that helped you get the interview in the first place, plus the interview. And then either they start at the top again, or they start from the university that you actually got the interview with and work down again. So let's say if your backup was fifth, they could potentially start at the fifth, and then you only actually have two universities that they kind of like throw between. So that's why, and again, it depends. I was lucky, my dream school / like most competitive schools, Notre Dame, so I naturally put it first, and it kind of helped. For other people, if they want to roll the dice on that dream school, 100%. But there's also, potentially the argument to have your most competitive first, because then even if you don't get in there interview wise, at least you've had the interview, and even if you scored really well and maybe by some stroke of luck, there's some different ratio at a different university that preferences you based on all of the other candidates. And that means you have 5 options if it's your first one to kind of like.
Yeah, that's exactly like that's right on the ball. Yeah, if you were to put Melbourne Uni or whatever university you want to get into as your like last preference, if you only get that one, think of so stuff like that. Cool. I hope that answered your question. There was another question in the chat. So what made you choose UCIT over UniMel? I never got into UniMel. I wish I did, but I didn't. But I got into University of Wollongong, and I chose UCIT over Wollongong. It's a separate webinar, but just to be very just to quickly answer that question, I really wanted to go back to my family in Melbourne, so flying to Melbourne was actually easier from UCIT. That's the main reason why. Okay, cool. I think we move on to the next slide. So, in terms of your GAMSAT and GPA, so now this is another thing we need to consider. We consider like your dream university, right? But then we also need to consider realistically how competitive you are. So a lot of universities actually weigh you differently when it comes to GAMSAT and GPA. So for GPA, some universities weigh your final year. So your final year being that the last year of your degree as 3 times, and then second year 2 times, and then your first year 1 time. So an example I can give you is that say what's the university with 3 times, ANU, for example, right? So for ANU, they would consider my final year of honors as 3 times, which was a GPA 7, and then my third year, which was 2 times, and then my second year as 1 time. You can sort of play around with that a little bit as well, where say your first degree wasn't the best, and you needed to do another degree. You could potentially do an honors year, you could do a grad diploma, you could do a master's. There are bonuses around that. I would ask you guys to really look through the GEMSAS guide and look at each of the universities in terms of what sort of bonuses they give, and also what sort of degrees that they consider, because not all universities consider masters and graduate degrees, but and that might be in favor of you as well, because you might have a really good bachelor's degree and honors degree, which will help you to boost up your GPA. But if you are not in that position where your bachelor's degree wasn't the best, and that was actually my position initially, that's why I did a second degree. It's okay to do another degree, but do be strategic about that. Also, GAMSAT, we do need to consider how universities weigh GAMSAT. It is not as I guess it doesn't really affect your combination as much. So for example, like Melbourne Uni, for example, they actually take an average GAMSAT score, whereas other universities, they do like this funky equation, and then you have like a little bit of a lower GAMSAT. So do consider that, but it's basically very negligible. And also think about the universities that weigh your GPA differently as well. So some universities weigh your GPA 3, 2, 1, but some universities weigh your final year and your second year as 2 times, and then some universities just do a complete average. And if you do the maths, the universities that just do a complete average, your GPA won't be as high. Also, consider some of the universities that don't take 2020 results. I did my honors year in 2020, and a lot of universities did not take my honors year, which was a shame. And still to this day, some universities don't take 2020 results. So if you're not competitive for those universities, it may be best not to put them in your application, because it's better to use your resources elsewhere and apply to a university that will take your 2020 results. So yeah, and also consider UQ as well. So UQ has this really cool thing where they actually take your key degree. And what that means is a key degree is your most recent degree. They don't care about what you did before that. So for example, I did an honors year in 2020, and that was the last degree that I completed, right? They would consider GPA just for that. So that means if I got first class honors for my year, that would mean that I would have a GPA 7. Okay, so a couple of questions are coming through, so I'll just read them out. Which universities didn't consider your 2020 results? Deakin didn't consider. Melbourne Uni at the time didn't consider, but now they consider honors. But Macquarie at the time didn't consider, and then they backflipped. ANU had some sort of full-time thing going on. But at the moment, what you guys need to consider, I think it's Deakin that is the one that is not taking 2020 results. But yeah, do look around, and it's it's really clear cut that they do that. Okay. All right. Someone asked, could you tell me what would be a competitive GAMSAT and GPA for undergrad? Would it be lower or need to do an honors? Extracurriculars needed for med schools like UCID or Uni Mel? What okay, so there's like 3 questions in that. Okay, so I think Angus, you can chime in here as well. So in terms of your competitive GAMSAT and GPA, it does vary every year. There's a different pool of applicants. There's like different thresholds, and also there's like a lot of factors, right? So it's really hard to pinpoint what is competitive, right? But what I would tell you is to go through the past data from previous years. So look at the data from last year, the year before, and they're all freely online. You can go to Paging Doctor, you can go to Reddit, you can even go onto Fraser's community as well. People are sharing their results from previous years, and that'll give you a ballpark as to where to go. That's what I did for UCID. For UCID, I had a GAMSAT of 56, and I was looking around, and I saw the year that I was on the waiting list, someone with a 57 got into UCID, and I was like, oh, okay, all right, I just need to bump it up a little bit, and I can potentially get there. But then the year after, I got on the waiting list again because I got a 57 and someone with a 58 got in. So it does change, but that's sort of a ballpark thing. GPA, I would say anything above a 6 is good, but just be wary. There's a lot of factors in that. I'm just I'm giving you numbers here, but there's a lot of factors with GPA. So do think about where you are standing with each university. Some universities, such as like Griffith, for example, or like Wollongong. Some of them are hurdle universities. So, and even UCID as well. So GPA doesn't really matter in the sense that you just need to hit a threshold. Angus, do you want to add anything to that?
No, that was really well put. The only thing I'll probably throw in there is that, yeah, whilst you're considering all of this, you've got your GPA, you've got your GAMSAT, and at some point, like your kind of extracurricular stuff that contribute towards an interview, and these are all the elements that make up what you need to consider when you're placing your preferences. So just make sure you do spend a lot of time playing around with the numbers, going and looking at the data, and coming up with that idea of what is best yourself, because truly it is a case-by-case situation. And for anyone who's feeling a bit down, re GPA or GAMSAT, it's also a bit of a reminder that, hey, there are ways around this. There's a question in the chat about a grad dip to improve GPA. If you want to, you can go away and you can do some extra courses, because they do only take the last kind of like 3 relevant years of study. And that's kind of very hopeful, especially as Siddharth was saying, you took your undergrad pretty chill because you're having lots of fun elsewhere. So it's just a nice thing to be reminded of, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think like a little bit about my own story. So I did biomed at Deakin, and my GPA was 5.3, and that was not competitive anywhere. And I was really upset. I was thinking, where do I go with my life after this? And like a lot of people that we meet and we think about during that time, we think, okay, we'll just do 1 degree and then we'll get into med school. But in reality, it doesn't happen all the time. And I had to swallow my pride and do another degree. And that's why I ended up doing science at Melbourne Uni. I did a really cool thing though. I transferred my credit for first year. So I did science at Melbourne Uni for 2 years. And I tried to boost up my GPA. My GPA wasn't that great at Melbourne Uni either, but it was enough for me to do an honours year. And I would say to everyone here, don't stop trying. keep doing stuff in the background to boost your resume, boost your chances on the application. And that's exactly what I did. Once I got into that honors year, it was basically like I knew this was a risk, because if I don't do well in my honors year, it's going to bring down my GPA. But if you're taking that risk, you're taking a well-mediated risk, and you will do well as a result of it. I would say masters is a bit of a hard one, in the sense that you may there is a possibility you may not hit those high distinctions, because it is a master's course. That's why I personally would go down the research route. But really, it's up to you guys, like how you guys think. Like, I'm not good with exams. I'm actually good with assignments. So a research year was just amazing for me. Okay, I'll talk about that later. But I'll talk about that later. That just came in my head. Another question: extracurricular activities, that will be answered a bit later on. And okay, any more questions? I'm just scrolling through.
Yeah, there are a few questions that are quite specific. Love them. Really great. We might hold some of the university, focused questions till the end, maybe. Otherwise,
Sure.
We'll just sit here and speculate. If we can kind of just ask questions about the broader concepts that we're talking about, you know what I mean? Like, what are GAMSAT schools? What is GPA weighting? Those kind of things. And then we'll kind of whittle down to more specific stuff at the end. That might be best.
Okay. So another person just mentioned that they don't want to do an honors year. And that's fair. That's completely fair. I think it's a very it's a very personal thing not do an honors year, but do be wary that once you get into medical school, in your third year, you will be doing research. You'll be churning out a thesis, and I think it's better to do a research year earlier when it means it actually means something. Once you get into medical school, how hard is it to do well in honors? Actually, personally, it wasn't really hard. Your supervisor actually has an incentive for you to do well, because they want to publish your paper. So there's a lot of secondary, third reviews, and making sure that you pass the year with flying colors. Okay, cool. I think we'll move on. Bonuses. Angus, do you want to start this off, and then I'll go in as well with this?
Yeah, of course. So again, bit of a behind the curtains black box kind of thing. We know that there are bonuses. Again, there's lots of differences between universities. Some that's publicized, some that isn't. The big ones are probably rurality, the research piece, especially now. I know Notre Dame has changed their process from portfolio based to a combination of Casper and some sort of like actual point system, where they consider what they would have previously considered within your portfolio, but within like a ranking system. So it's a little less subjective, a bit more objective. And then obviously that research piece is all in the work experience. And then there's definitely stuff to do with, socioeconomic status, and those associated scholarships. And if you apply, if you relate to any one of these, it's great. Unfortunately, it is a bit hard outside of like the work experience, that's like research piece. And or like, you're coming to us early, you haven't already done an undergraduate degree, moving and doing your undergraduate at a university that you think you might want to go to, the alma mater bonus, it's kind of hard to gain. Like, you're either qualified for a scholarship or not, you're either rural or not. So don't waste time on things that you don't think are going to work well for you, and really focus on which one of these bonuses that actually apply to you in your life, and try and push that forward as best you can. Will.
Alrighty. Will has a question.
I was just wondering if you've got any sort of anecdotal sense of how rigorous they are with the evidence you provide. So I previously worked full-time and definitely satisfy that, but I haven't worked there in 4 years. So it's hard to go back and find like all these pay slips and all this other stuff that they list. Do you have any idea how brutal they are going to be about providing evidence? Obviously, that might be a question for them, but just wondering if you've heard.
I can answer this question. So I think in terms of your evidence, try and get as much evidence as you can. They do have a list of what you can provide. A stat deck is pretty good to provide to them. But also, like, I think doctors' letters, lawyer letters, anyone like a reputed person in the community who can vouch for you. I think that's relevant. So for example, actually, this is actually a good segue into what I wanted to add on to what Angus has been saying. So back in 2020, I applied to Melbourne Uni, and I actually applied through the GAM special consideration stream because I'm rural, number one, but also I had some personal difficulties, and it's okay to talk about that. And it's really good that Melbourne Uni as a university is pioneering that. I put it in because I thought I might as well share what's going on in my life. Maybe this will help me. And I think that's the reason why they took my 56 GAMSAT and 5.6 GPA and gave me an interview. And I was really, really shocked at that case. And a lot of people do have different circumstances. And I'm not saying this to game the system. I'm just saying that it's okay to talk about your own problems and share it in the application. And this improves the equity of you getting into the medical school that you want to. So do consider applying through the GAM for Uni Melb. And in terms of evidence, I just shared a stat deck and anything that was relevant to my my circumstances.
Yeah, for me personally, Will, all of my referees were emailed and or called. So I don't think I actually had to provide any formal documentation, but you had to have like essentially an associated reference and their phone and email. Yeah.
I hope that answers your question. Awesome. So I guess bonuses are a huge thing, as Angus has been saying. And I think, like, if you're a Deakin University student, definitely apply to Deakin, because not only are you getting a 4% bonus because you're a Deakin University student, but there's also other stuff there that it will give you the edge to get in. I was a rural student and a Deakin University student, so I got an 8% bonus. This I'm not 100% sure where the bonus is being added to. Maybe it's a combination, maybe it's just a GPA or the GAMSAT. Not sure, but who cares? We shouldn't really be questioning it. We should just be applying and maximizing our chances. There's also the research stuff as well. So ANU, for example. Thank you, Will. So Deakin applies the bonus over everything. Okay. You've heard it here first, guys. So in terms of your research degree, honors, masters, PhD, there's some bonuses for that for some universities. I'm not saying go into an honors and get a bonus. I'm not saying that to do that, but if you have an honors, or if you have a master's, or if you have a PhD, you can use that in your application. My plan initially was that I finished my honors year, my GPA went up, but if it wasn't competitive enough, I was going to do a PhD, and I'll definitely get a GPA 7 at the end of it. GPA 7 would be given by Griffith University. So Griffith actually gives a lot of bonuses for that. So just to consider that as well. There's actually someone in previous years who finished a PhD, and then he applied to Notre Dame, and then he got into medicine there. So he was able to utilize that. Also, Melbourne Uni, they do consider masters as well. So there's a thing there that if you're doing a doctor of physio, or if you're doing a doctor of optometry, it goes up by 10 places. So that's another thing to consider. Financial disadvantage, like I said, there's all these circumstances. You should consider applying and making this more equitable for you to apply. And Indigenous background, I mean, self-explanatory. We need more Indigenous students. We only have well, this year we have 12 in UCID, but the year before we had 2. I don't know about Notre Dame. Do you know how many Indigenous students are there at Notre Dame?
Nah, it's not advertised.
Okay. Yeah. So, and there might be students in the cohort you may not know because they're not willing to share that information. Does that make sense to everyone? Any questions about the bonuses? Oh, and when I say catchment area as well, so if you're in Geelong, for example, you'll get a bonus for that for Deakin. There's also clinical experience and all that. So yeah, just go through the GEMSAT guide for Deakin. There's a bunch of bonuses. Don't look over it. Definitely look into it. Okay. Is it worth applying to UNDS considering we don't qualify for any bonuses? We would be losing 10. I'm not sure how to answer that question. Angus, would you know how to answer that question?
Sorry, where's that?
Oh, it was a direct message. Is it worth applying to UNDS considering we don't qualify for any bonuses?
It kind of depends. I think it comes back to essentially the first slide where like, what's your dream school? Where are you most competitive at? And then like, putting your other preferences after that. If you think you're competitive at Notre Dame because of, I don't know, how good you did in the Casper or how well they weight like a certain set of points, then great, go ahead. But if you really consider it in somewhere like say Deakin and that's where you want to go is better, or somewhere kind of like UQ or Griffith is just fits your approach and application better, then go with that. I think so. I don't know if that really answers the question, but yeah, if UNDS works for you and you think you're competitive, go for it. But if you're more competitive at another school because of points or for any other reason, go with the other school.
Yeah. I have the same thoughts as well. Couple of questions coming through. Is it worth applying to an undergraduate med school? Yes, do it if you can, if you want to. It's like if you get in, then who cares, right? You would have to do the UCAT though, which is a whole different ball game. I did the UMAT when it was called the UMAT in 2014. I hated it, but it might be good for you. So do consider it, and we have courses for that as well. Okay. Does Unimelb offer the 10 places if you do masters with Unimelb? I believe it is through Unimelb. Yes. Do go on their website. It's in the fine print. But yeah, I don't want to give the wrong information about that. But I did read there that it was 10 places. Again, it's a very minor thing. So not to focus on that too much. Okay. Full fee. We're going to get to that actually. So I'm going to keep moving forward. Okay, cool. So Angus, do you want me to take this one? Okay. All right. So this was a strategy that I took when I was thinking about the university. So a lot of the universities have different number of sizes in terms of their cohort, right? So as we all know, Melbourne Uni has one of the biggest in terms of medical students getting in, as well as UQ. So that means that there's actually more opportunity for you to get into those universities. It may not look like that from the outset because they have high scores in getting in, but it's actually easier to get into them than say University of Wollongong, which has approximately I believe it was 40 seats, right? Yeah, it was 40 seats last year. So look at each of the universities. So when I was applying, I put Melbourne Uni as number one because Melbourne Uni had more seats, more I guess I had the GAM, and also it worked out in the previous year. So I was like, oh, cool, I can apply there. But then I also put UQ in there as well, because I thought about the GPA. That was a key thing for me, and also the number of places that they were on offer as well. Do exercise caution about the medical schools that have quotas. So there's like combined pathways and also rural pathways. So there was a question about the Deakin rural pathway. I believe so last year what they did was they actually they set up the rural training scheme where they would have rural students coming in, but they would also have a quota for students who would purely be in rural for most of their degree. And when we did the calculations, about 50% of the cohort was from a rural background. And if we think about that, that means those who are from a non-rural background, their scores would be inflated, and it would be hard for them to get in. And so that's something just to consider about. I still applied to Deakin because I was getting those bonuses, but also my 2020 results weren't considered, so I didn't get an interview from Deakin. ANU as well. ANU has a combined degree pathway. Also, it's a smaller cohort, so do be wary of that. However, I have heard in previous years that that their scores have been a bit lower, so it has been okay to apply and get an interview from ANU. So yeah, just be wary of that. Also, do consider applying to the rural pathway schemes and the extended rural cohort schemes. It's not. There's no like set evidence that this will give you a higher chance of getting into that medical school, but also if you don't know what's happening behind the scenes, right? So do consider applying. But again, also I just want to mention this as well. If you don't want to be in rural for 4 years for your rest of your degree, maybe don't apply to them. But also do think that after you finish medical school, you probably have to do a stint in rural. So there's just pros and cons to this, which we need to consider. But yeah, do consider that. The extended rural cohort is a Melbourne Uni thing, I believe. And then there's like other rural pathway schemes, because as we know, we need doctors in rural towns, and also I think you get more practical experience when you're rural, to be honest, than metropolitan.
Yeah. So yeah, really interesting. Obviously, I'm only my first year of medicine, so I can't really comment on rural schools or what it is like to be a rural doctor or anything. But within the first 6 weeks, at least at University of Notre Dame, we've had so many seminars about rural health, and they really want you. Like, they kind of bend over backwards, which is amazing. So I guess if you're considering rural programs and, you know, the subsequent commitment that might mean, honestly, unless you're hell-bent against living rural and you have to be metropolitan, I'd lean into the idea of going, you know, out west or whatever, because it is, like Siddhartha was saying, such a great experience. There's so much more practical opportunities for you to kind of like get involved. And honestly, like, the pay is pretty ridiculous. They will sponsor a lot. And there's plenty of perks, so certainly something to consider. And yeah, would caution against turning your nose up at the idea.
Yeah, a couple of questions coming through. So, do any schools give credit to rurality if it's not consecutive 5 years? Unfortunately, no. It has to be consecutive 5 years, which is a shame. I believe Wollongong will add a bonus to their portfolio if you're remotely, like, anything to do with rural, but we'll cover that in a little bit. But yeah, unfortunately, it has to be 5 years or 10 years cumulative. Okay, I applied through rural training. Okay, so if you're applying through the rural training stream through Deakin, they will consider you for the general stream as well. But I know that if you're applying to University of Sydney, for example, there is the Dubbo stream and the Metro stream. So you need to apply to both streams to be considered. But if you get a Dubbo, if you get the Dubbo offer, you're not going to get a Metro offer. So do be careful about some of the medical schools that offer those two streams. from my understanding, Deacon does consider you for both streams. Angus, you want to add anything to that?
No, not really. I think, yeah, you covered everything. Maybe I might. Oh, hang on. We had a talk about full fee places. Is that this one or is that the next slide?
That would be actually it would be no. Oh, that's very odd. They have it has been edited. We'll talk about the full fee places now, actually. So Angus, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So I actually don't know a lot about it. And all that I know and can comment on is at the University of Notre Dame, where when I applied, right, I put my first preferences in, got an interview, great, did the interview, didn't go as well as I thought as I thought I did, because I got in. I was a bit disappointed with some of my answers, but clearly it was enough, which is great. But considering how I felt after that interview, I went online and I kind of looked at a few more numbers, and what I found was that we're 120 places, right, at the University of Notre Dame, and there were I think 300 interview offers that got sent out. But then as I read on, what I was actually quite surprised to realize was that there was 120 places, yes, but 60 of those were meant to preference people that put full fee. 30 of those were meant to preference people that put like rurality, essentially, like bonded. And there was only 30 for the Commonwealth supported places. And that was surprising to me because I hadn't put full fee. It was not something I was prepared to do for a number of reasons. But when I saw that, I was like, oh my God, I've just, almost halved my chances, essentially, not putting that. So certainly something to think about. I know that was the spread at the University of Notre Dame. I'm not sure about the exact spread at other universities, but yeah, it's certainly something to consider.
Yeah, and I think to add to that as well, if you can't afford it, don't put it in your application, because chances are you'll be considered for that, and then you'll get an offer for that, and then if you can't afford it, you're just you have to try again next year, and yeah, that's truly a shame. And the thing is that if you didn't put the full fee place, they would just go down the list and they would then offer you a place at a different university, and then you would get a CSP or a BNP. So do consider that as well, because like we've been saying this entire webinar, they start from the very top preference and then they keep going down, and see how competitive you are for that preference. If you're not competitive, they're going to keep going down until the very last preference. So there was actually, sorry, can you guys hear me? Sorry, I just got a phone call. I better turn that off. Okay. As I was saying, so in terms of, there was another question that came up just then in terms of, should you put rural as your first preference, and would that increase your chances? I don't think it would increase your chances. And the reason why it won't increase your chances is because you're actually reducing your chances of getting into a CSP or a general stream offer, right? So if you were to put that rural stream and you're competitive for it, you would basically definitely take it, right? But if you were to put that as your number 2 and your general stream, which you really want as your number 1, you wouldn't be competitive for that, say, but then you'll still go down to your number 2. So either way, you're actually increasing your chances of getting into your general stream if you were to make that number 1. Also, just the thing about BNP and CSPs, from what I understand, what AMSA has found out in last year, there's actually no evidence to say that you get an edge if you put BNP as number 1 or CSP as number 1. It's actually randomized, so it doesn't mean that there's a lower cutoff for BNP or a lower cutoff for CSP. once you apply, it's just going to be randomized. So yeah, but do consider putting in BMP, because if you don't put it in at all, you're taking your chances of getting a medical offer. And BMP is actually not that bad. Like they keep changing it every year, but what I need to do, so I got a BMP offer. So what that means is that after medical school, for a cumulative of 3 years after working in a rural place, and honestly, I think is pretty good.
Yeah, like I said,
Okay.
the opportunities at rural are amazing. And yeah, they literally just throw things at you. Like we went over to the Blue Mountains, all expenses paid. Every few weeks there's a trip. There was one out to Wagga, again, all expenses paid.
It's funny that Blue Mountains is considered rural, because I was in Penrith for a placement.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think Hawkesbury is considered rural as well. And even if you get like posted up near Northern Rivers, like around Byron Bay area, it's beautiful. And there's plenty of great options. And I actually believe you can buy yourself out of being bonded as well. Like I think if you pay a certain amount of money.
Yeah, you can. They might change it though.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah.
And I also acknowledge that we're throwing all of these random facts at you, and I'm sure you're generating this very complex algorithm as to how you're going to put your preferences.
Make an Anki card out of all the facts.
Yeah, exactly. Just reminded to kind of zoom out and just consider the big rocks first, right? So what's going to get you, like, the 20% that gets you 80% of the results, right? Like do you like research? Is that something big? Okay, what are the research universities? Cool. Did you have a good GAMSAT? Great. What preference GAMSAT more? Did you have a great GPA? Good. What preference GPA more? And then sort of like whittle it down to options of like rurality, points, complexity between like CSP and like paying all the money. But make sure you start big and then get smaller and smaller. Don't get caught in the middle.
More questions are coming through. We'll probably keep moving forward, but I'll be very quick. CSP and BMP are not considered two preferences; they're just considered the one. But do put them in when you see them. BMP after rural commitment, yeah. So CSP does not have that, or you basically you can do whatever you want to do after med school. If you get a BMP offer, yeah, you won't be considered for CSP. So you only get one offer. That is very, very important. You don't get more than one offer. So that's what I'm saying. If you put a full fee place in, you might get the full fee place, and then that's it. You won't get any offer. So and also, if you can't do rural, say like family reasons or something, don't put it in. But you'll be basically taking out a big chunk of your chance of getting into med school. So do put in BMP, CSP, and consider full fee. Alrighty, portfolios. We're both very well established on portfolios. So it's a shame that Notre Dame took out the personal statement and portfolio. I actually enjoyed writing those personal statements and pouring my heart out, and then Notre Dame rejecting me. So it was a good process. But the only portfolio medical school that is in Australia is University of Wollongong. And the reason why they have that portfolio is because people are coming from various different backgrounds. The doctor that we want in this day and age is to be diverse, not someone who just has a science background and is going to be a robot and just going to talk to patients like they don't have any sense of morality. We want someone who can actually empathize with people, someone who has different perspectives and can think outside the box. And Wollongong is one of those universities that is doing that currently. So if you're someone who has a lot of extracurricular activities, this is your chance to shine. Bit about myself, and Angus can really talk about his own experience because his experiences are amazing. So in my final year of biomed, in my third year, I had a taste of clubs and societies, and then I became the treasurer for the Biomed Society. After that, I went to Melbourne Uni, became the president of a charity club, and then during my honours year, I was vice president for another club, and then during my PhD, I was the vice president of the faculty club. It was the Anatomy and Physiology Students Society, which was, if anyone's from Melbourne Uni, it was the Department of Anatomy and Physiology. So what you can see here is that I kept building up my resume as I went through the years. And even though I was trying to focus on my GPA, I know I was not the smartest kid, but I could shine elsewhere. So I kept bringing up my leadership experience, and also I was getting involved with extracurricular activities, so like service, human endeavor. So PhD was one of those years where I got to do a lot of things. So I got to present at conferences. I got to talk to patients, and these are some things that Wollongong really enjoyed. And yes, actual work experience does count. I talked about how I was a tutor. I was a private tutor for high school. I also talked about like stuff like I did in my community. So I have a Bangladeshi background, and we have a huge community in Melbourne. So I got to organize a lot of the cultural programs there with the little kids, and this is something that was really good. So do consider those things when you're applying to Wollongong. Also, your rurality. So with the rurality, if you have work experience or any sort of experience in a rural setting, definitely put that into your application, because for Wollongong, your rural bonus is not actually given to your GPA and GAMSAT, it's actually given to your portfolio. And as a result, 70% of the cohort ends up being rural. So another thing to consider about that when it comes to rurality stuff. Also, there's other universities that do consider personal statements. So Dubbo considers a personal statement. So does Uni Melbourne, the GAM application, and other rural streams such as Deakin, for example. These are really good in terms of showcasing why you want to go rural, and it also gives you an edge. And I think in this webinar, we can tell is that the more things that you can do, it gives you more things to shine in. If you're just giving like one thing, for example, or just your GPA or just your GAMSAT, and say it's not as competitive, you're actually reducing your chances. So think about these personal statements, and at Phrases, we can actually help out with the personal statements as well. There's also CASPER. So Wollongong actually allows you to do CASPER as well. So does UNDS and UNDF. CASPER is not a hard thing. It's actually pretty straightforward. You just need to practice, and we can help out with that as well. But yeah, it's another thing that universities are considering. The year before, when I did CASPER was the make or break when it came to the Wollongong application, because after they considered my GAMSAT, it was GAMSAT and portfolio to get the interview, but then they took out GAMSAT, and it was just portfolio 50%, 25% CASPER, and then 25% interview. And if you do the maths, your CASPER was important. Your portfolio was definitely important, and your interview was important, similar to CASPER. So do consider those things. And yeah, okay, I'll give it to Angus so that he can give you some gems about his time when he applied through Notre Dame.
Yeah, so kind of like what Sudipta was saying, doing lots of stuff outside really helps. I always tell people that it's important firstly to know a bit more about the world, and then know what kind of doctor you're going to be within that world. And that's kind of like the rallying cry to kind of like, go and have great experiences. Why is it valuable? Well, it contributes, yes, to that perspective, but secondly, to this broader sort of story arc, right, that everyone loves, that you can capture in either your personal statement or your portfolio or in any number of your interview questions, okay? It's always nice to refer to some sort of like legitimate experience when answering something, so it's not just noise. And that's a really good thing, because you can showcase, what you've done and what you've learned, and that's super important. My own story arc, a little bit different to Sudipta. So Sudipta, you could imagine could speak on how, love to get people together, very pro-social, inclusion, all of these kind of like wonderful things, right? For me personally, I had kind of like a two-pronged approach. I had this academia thing, and then I had this sport thing, and I wasn't quite sure how I'd kind of like get them to meet. But I ended up talking more broadly about how sport is essentially like a selfish pursuit. And it is really just something to, do for yourself. And I was kind of essentially sick of that. And now I was ready to kind of like go and do something that I, really wanted to do. And I'd had fortunately evidence in the past that, I was interested in, just the human body and helping people and all of that. And I integrated some work experience as a social worker and a few other committees and stuff that I've been on, but it all kind of fit, like I said, into this broader story arc. So it's really important to consider your story arc. And then does that story arc align with the university? So the research piece, we already know somewhere like, I guess UQ really like research, whereas somewhere like University of Wollongong would love some rurality piece. So if you could somehow get a story arc into helping those less fortunate, tearing down barriers, bridging gaps of like socioeconomic status, all of that kind of stuff. As for Casper, I personally can't comment on it because I haven't actually sat it. I actually didn't put University of Wollongong as a preference because I didn't really want to go there when I was applying. But to my understanding, as much as it's, and this is just to answer a few questions, as much as it's replacing the portfolio piece in Notre Dame, there are still options to showcase, your experiences of what you've done, first through the point system, and secondly, in the instant that you get an interview and you can then talk to these broader experiences, which is what they're looking for.
Awesome. There's some questions about like Casper, which I'll answer now actually, and also there's a very good question. So without an interview, how do you showcase all your community, people, and real world skills? Angus, what do you think about that?
Outside of universities that look into your point system or B into some sort of a portfolio, so University of Wollongong, I actually don't think you can. And I know that can be quite frustrating and like a weird reality, but it's important probably to face up to it. So Dupta might have a different perspective, but from my experiences, and it might sound a bit harsh, but at the end of the day, because we actually got a lecture on this at the University of Notre Dame, because they were getting the portfolio and they got all the first and second years together, because obviously we as a group collectively opted into the idea that we were going to a school that considered, the bigger picture, and that they were changing that. And I thought they actually made some really good points. And it centered around the idea that, there's probably like thousands of appropriate medical applicants. And there's so many people that have done so much great stuff. And to distinguish between people on that subjective basis, the volume has just gotten to a point where it's not feasible. So unfortunately, they do have to whittle down the cohort before they consider the subjective piece, i.e. the interview. Unfortunately, it's a hurdle to make. Arguably, it's only going to be a little bit higher than the hurdle it already was. So I don't know how much of a difference it is, but yeah, that would be my response to that.
I think in terms of like removing portfolios and putting Casper in place, I think there'll be a very, very slight change in terms of the whole GAMSAT and GPA scores being inflated, and also them offering an interview. I think with Casper, you can still showcase your own talents. If you ever done a Casper exam, they give you video scenarios and questions how you can answer them, and anyone can do that. It's not that you need to be offered an interview and then you can showcase your talent. You can actually do the Casper and showcase your talent through that. So and in America, Casper is so well established. It's actually one of the core things that they use to get into medical school. So don't be too afraid that you can't showcase your skills because the portfolio has been removed. I think also in a different perspective, if you like, even though a lot of us have extracurricular activities and we can put this in our portfolio, I think ultimately it will help us in doing well in the interview, because you have those people skills and you're able to talk to people. And once you improve all the other parameters, the interview is just going to be just a small step, and you're going to blitz through it. So yeah, I don't think we should devalue extracurricular activities because we can't put it in a portfolio. I think we can use it to our advantage in the future. And also, there was a question about so Casper has recommended not to take external training resources. Very controversial. So what I did 2 years ago, I actually went on YouTube, and there's a lot of people, like a lot of companies and a lot of YouTubers who actually talked about Casper. And I saw how they answered questions and how they modeled their answers, and I modeled it like with their what sort of things that they said as well, and things that I would consider, because I think with external companies, what they do is that they try to extract the value that you have internally. It's not that they're trying to get you to put words into your mouth and then you use it in Casper or the interview, right? It's about bringing the true version of yourself. And if you're a psychopath, I don't think you should be in medicine anyway, right? Yeah, I think you wouldn't be performing worse if you were to get that help. I think it's better to get tutoring for Casper for interview rather than just blitz it on your own. Okay. Okay. We'll keep moving.
Yeah, sorry, Sudipta, just to echo that. Very interesting read, Casper. I actually thought it was like a weird situation-based answer response thing. So it's great that you can actually like showcase some of your experience. I will say though, like, it is important to be judicious in your approach, right? We have a limited amount of time, and you need to kind of like spend that time to maximize your chances. And if there is a bigger hurdle that involves, GAMSAT and GPA, maybe it's about shifting focus there, and then just having, instead of like a huge range of portfolio pieces, because I think Notre Dame asked for 4 different things you've done in 3 different areas. So it was like 4 in community, 4 in academia, and then 4 in like kind of essentially like extracurricular leadership or something. And that's a lot of stuff to do. That's 12 big rocks that you're trying to kind of satisfy. And now really in the interview, I only referenced maybe 3 or 4 of my experiences. Again, those big rocks, right? The fact that I was an athlete, the fact that I did social work, and the fact that I'd done a lot of science research experience. So maybe considering this change, people might spend a little less time looking for those like, extra curricular activities, and just focus on those extracurricular activities that would create really good talking points in the interview, or it seems something like Casper.
Yeah. There was actually a comment about where to get Casper resources. Yeah, there's a couple of really good websites. I probably should mention them in this webinar, but you can check the chat. But because like I went through that myself, I actually ended up helping the team to create resources for Casper. So you rest assured you're going to get a pretty good value once if you do decide to go through phrases. Okay, so Wollongong entry requirements are lower compared to other top schools. I would actually say Wollongong is a top school, because the head of GAMSAT is also the head of admissions at Wollongong. But so it's actually really hard to get into Wollongong. There is actually only 38% of people who applied got into Wollongong, during my time. So it's actually generally really hard because of all the factors that I've said. So yeah, every medical school has a different sort of method, and it's I won't say it's relatively easier or harder to get into those medical schools. Just like consider your GPA and your GAMSAT and where you apply. I think that's the main thing. So yeah. Okay, cool. All right. We'll probably finish up in the next 5 or so minutes. but if there's more questions coming through, we'll go a little bit longer. I'll take the slide. So applying to a non-GEMSAT university. So please, please, please apply to UCID because it's not a GEMSAT university, which means you have the opportunity to not only apply to 6 medical schools, but an extra medical school, which is the University of Sydney, aka #1 medical school in the country, they say. So there are no interviews. That is good and bad. In my personal opinion, I hope University of Sydney would consider bringing back the interviews. But as a result, what they're going to do is they're going to rank each section of the GAMSAT, which means that there is going to be, if you have a high section 1 or a high section 2, that will give you a big edge when it comes to applying, even if you had an amazing section 3. Okay, Will, did you have a question?
I do. Very quick one. So with the offer timing of UCID and the GEMSAT unis, did they normally align so you could actually have 2 offers in your hand at once? And if so, would it normally just be the first round offer that might come at the same time as UCID, or would it normally be like a second or third round offer potentially?
So with UCID offers, they actually come out earlier than the GEMSAT offers, and a lot of people then accept those offers, right? But then when the GEMSAT offers come out, say like Melbourne Uni, for example, a lot of people who do get into Melbourne Uni, they end up rejecting the offer at UCID. And then what happens is that there is that gap that UCID needs to fill. So then they end up offering second round, third round offers. So I actually got a last round offer from UCID. So I was going to go to University of Wollongong. I was happy. I was ready. Got my friends and everything. But then 10 days before starting, I got an offer from UCID, and my life changed. I took the UCID offer, and And then with Wollongong, they actually gave my offer to someone else. So there are chances of getting second round, third round offers. It's very, very rare. UCID does offer those second, third round offers. GEMSAT's very, very rare. So yeah, do consider applying to UCID if you have a really high GAMSAT. I would say in the past, the GAMSAT score has been high 70s, but rural is actually pretty low. So do consider it. GPA is a hurdle. So if you're worried about your GPA, this is a perfect university to apply to. Also, there's a Dubbo stream. The Dubbo stream is the Dubbo cohort is actually amazing at UCID. They have a lot of hands-on stuff, and it's also another opportunity to apply. So do consider Dubbo. I didn't apply to the Dubbo stream because I knew that I'm rural, so I would be very competitive to get into the metro stream for UCID. So and I ended up getting into UCID. I was initially waiting. I was on the waiting list. So yeah, in terms of Flinders. Flinders is a bit of a weird one where they have a high quota for Flinders graduates. So that means that if you did a Flinders degree, and a lot of people do this to get into Flinders, there's a higher chance of getting it. And that means your GAMSAT cutoff would be lower. So approximately every year, 60 to 70% of the cohort are Flinders graduates. If you're a non-Flinders graduate, that means that it's like, your GAMSAT is going to be really high. Also, if you're from a rural background, you can apply to Flinders as well. Again, GAMSAT can be high as well. There's also personal statements for different streams. So there's the Northern Territory stream. If you want to go to the Northern Territory, you can apply to Flinders and you probably get it. So yeah, we will. Okay, so very quickly to wrap this webinar up. So we have talked about the medical applications. We've talked about everything that you need to do. Now, what do you do at the very end? And there's going to be a webinar on this in the future. But once you have applied to the medical schools, think about your medical interview. Start your preparation early. GAMSAT, you can't change anymore. GPA, you can't change anymore. Get neck deep into your interview prep. Even if you think that you can't get an interview, do start, because what I did is that I actually didn't start my interview prep until when I got the interview offer, and I didn't even know that I was going to get an interview offer, and I was not prepared, and that's why I didn't. And that's one of the reasons why I didn't get into Melbourne Uni, because I bombed the interview. But then the year after, I started 6 months early, and you don't have to go crazy like me, but started early, knew who my enemy was, and then I capitalized. So this is the blueprint for you guys. Do take a screenshot. This is going to be available in other webinars, but do take a screenshot of this slide and get into it. So yeah, I think so. Now we have time for some questions that we've been deflecting. But yeah, thank you guys. Thank you. You guys have been very interactive with everything. And yeah, so any questions before we wrap up today? Anything, Angus, you want to add as well?
No, mate, very thorough. Very thorough. Just happy to field, yeah, any sort of questions.
Okay. And feel free to just unmute and talk into the mic. Yep. Okay. I'll go back to the previous slide. Yes. Jeez. Oh, here we go. Okay. Is a GAMSAT score 70 plus for all sections be competitive for UCID? Yes, definitely. No, yeah. There was a guy who got like 75, 75, 75, got into UniMelb and UCID, and then he chose UniMelb. Okay. So okay. So there was a question. My bachelor was complete over 10 years. So qualified, I'm using a grad dip as well, which will be completed, which was completed 2020. I want to apply for Deakin bonuses. Yeah, so they won't consider the grad dip results for 2020, but what I would do, I would apply to the universities that will consider your grad dip, such as, I believe from memory, Notre Dame definitely does. I think Macquarie does as well. Yeah, so do apply to those universities as well. You might need to do another bachelor's degree, unfortunately, which is okay. It's 3 years, and it will go by very quickly. Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, there's an Indigenous student in our call. Yeah, definitely applied through the Indigenous pathway. We need more Indigenous students. Okay, which particular section of the GAMSAT has the highest priority for UCID? That's a hard one. I think to answer that question properly, it's more like what other sections that students are not performing well in. I think section one actually is the one that a lot of students don't do well in. And if you do well in that section, your ranking goes up. So it's not that UCID is prioritizing that section. It's more like you just have to be consistently good at in every section. Yeah. Okay. Just another question about CSP and BMP. Do we only get to choose one? Can I only go for either CSP or BMP? Okay. So some universities actually give you the preference of preferencing which one you want first, or no preferences, right? Or I think some universities just you just have to preference all 2, 3, right? So for Melbourne Uni, for example, you can choose CSP as number 1, BMP as number 2, and then you get the third preference of full fee or not full fee. So you do have to preference your CSP and BMP because they do have to fill up those quotas. And BMP is very well sought out for like medical schools definitely want to fill up their BMP quota because we need doctors in rural. Can you put your results from multiple GAMSAT cities for you? I will personally message you about that. Okay. All right. I think we'll wrap it up here, guys. If you have any more questions, you can scan the QR code here, and I'll put my email in the chat. So, and Angus, if you want to put your email in the chat as well. Alrighty. Okay, you guys have been lovely today. And yeah, if you have any questions, email us about anything. We can set up some consultations one-on-one as well. And also do come to our weekly webinars. There are webinars every week. So make sure you're on the mailing list. And yeah, best of luck with your applications, and hopefully I'll see you guys in the interview space.
Yeah, good luck, everyone. Yeah, hopefully it works out for you guys.
All right. See you guys. Take care.